Thank you for joining us today. My name is Susan Birge. I'm the Assistant Director of Counseling and Psychological Services, and I also oversee the Student Health Center. This is an important topic. This is an important discussion to have with you today. We're talking about alcohol and drugs and all the resources here on campus. But before we go into that specifically, I want to remind you and revisit some of the information that we presented over orientation. And that is about this developmental stage that your son and daughter are in. 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, their brains are still forming, especially the prefrontal lobes. Now, the prefrontal lobe of a brain is that part of us that determines choices. That's where our judgment is. That's when we weigh out pros and cons. That's when we think about consequences. This part of the brain for this age group is not entirely formed. In fact, it won't be until the mid-20s. So how does that manifest for college students? Well, here they are in a new place, without parental supervision, very excited, very eager to fit in, and they have to make choices about their lifestyle. Some of the choices that they're going to be making are whether or not to drink alcohol and whether or not to take drugs. Again, without that judgment aspect of the brain, we're looking at young men and women who are going to experiment, who are curious, and who are, unfortunately, risk-taking. Let's talk about alcohol. Some students come to Fairfield University and they simply have no interest in consuming alcohol. However, a significant number of students, just like any college or university, think it's kind of synonymous with the college experience. And indeed, they choose to minimally experiment, and maybe the experimentation manifests into regular use, or maybe it transcends into abuse. Because it's an exciting time, the most vulnerable time for alcohol and drug use is the first 6 weeks of the freshman experience. I'm going to tell you why in a few minutes, but I want to give you some numbers because I really want you to understand and keep in perspective what we're dealing with in terms of how many students. So last year, again, this is not just the 6 weeks, but last year we had 870 total alcohol policy violations. 53 of those students were transported to a local hospital. We typically transport our students to either St. Vincent's Medical Center in Bridgeport or Bridgeport Hospital in Bridgeport. Both are under 10 minutes away, so it's a very brief transport. This is determined by our public safety officers. They are all EMT certified. So in their assessment of a student, if they feel that their health is compromised, if they believe that there could be a problem with respiration and their well-being, we're going to transport them to the hospital. That's where they belong, at that level of care. Many times public safety may assess and think to themselves, they're okay to go back to their room, they're going to feel better shortly. So they're very good at this, ascertaining who's safe and who needs a higher level of care. Let's look at the whys. Again, I mentioned to you, there's kind of a synonymous sense of the college experience and maybe drinking and parties and all the social aspect of it. But why do they drink? Well, they drink because of their social anxiety in part. They're in a new environment. They want to fit in. Again, they're curious. And they might engage in some risk-taking behavior, as we said. But very much, they want to fit in, and the peer pressure can be particularly difficult. Even though everyone is not drinking, they might think to themselves, everybody's drinking, and I don't want to be different, I don't want to be left out. So this is based on a survey. It's called the CORE survey. And these are some of the answers that we get. It breaks the ice. Again, the social anxiety. It enhances social activity. So it reduces kind of the anxiety, the stress. It's a social, reduces the inhibitions. And they're able to approach people or talk to people or maybe not feel so self-conscious. It gives people something to do. So let's say on Friday they're in classes. What are you doing tonight? What are you doing tonight? Oh, there's a party at the townhouses. Oh, there's a party in Claver Room 208. Well then, oh, okay, I want to be part of that. I'm going to go. And they assume, and maybe they're right, that a lot of people at the party are drinking. And so they want to fit in. It gives people something to talk about. So you can imagine if there was a big party on a Friday night, Saturday there's going to be a lot of talk. Oh, did you see this person? What did you do? What time did you get home? Oh, did you go back to the dining hall and get food? Or just not only recapping the night, maybe some gossip, but again, that sense of wanting to fit in and feel connected, having a sense of belonging. It also allows people to have more fun. Again, the inhibitions are dropped, they're friendlier, and if they're just having a little bit to drink, socially to drink, it can be fun. Where it stops being fun is if they brown out or black out, meaning they don't have recall, and of course, if their judgment is impaired, and if they have drank too much. Again, connecting with peers is important. This age group, they're looking to build relationships. And sometimes the relationships do not progress the way we would like them to, with developing a friendship, getting to know somebody. Again, at their age, with their hormones, sometimes they get involved sexually. And that can be facilitated because they're compromised under the influence of alcohol and maybe drugs. Let me tell you a little bit about specifically Fairfield U, but again, not unlike other universities and colleges. Most students, if we're looking at what is their substance use, it's going to be alcohol. That's the most popular. Unfortunately, the way they drink it can be dangerous. Because in the state of Connecticut, it is against the law for under 21 to drink alcohol, we uphold that law. So you can't bring in a 6-pack, you can't bring in a 12-pack to your dorm room or to your townhouses because you're going to be seen. So the tendency is to, unfortunately, be kind of sneaky and to maybe buy hard alcohol, vodka, or other kinds of hard liquor and bring that in. So they can get that in their dorm in a more stealth manner, but they also are going to drink it in a more stealth manner, and they're going to drink it more rapidly. So it's called pre-gaming. So before they go out, again, to reduce the social anxiety, maybe to fit in, maybe as an activity, again, thinking that it's fun, they will do shots. And the shots are of the hard liquor. So we hear stories of, oh, they did 7 shots, they did 8 shots, they did 9 shots before they went out. Well, as you can imagine, it takes a while for the body, the kidneys and the liver, to actually metabolize and break that down. So it might be even an hour, hour and a half later before really they experience the effects of that amount of alcohol. Now, if they get to a party and they continue drinking, that's having an awful lot of alcohol on board. So again, they're not drinking a lot of beer unless they can get to a party and maybe there's beer pong or the upperclassmen have beer. What they're probably doing more of is shots of hard liquor. The next most common substance on college campuses and Fairfield U is marijuana. This seems to be particularly trendy in the last 2 or 3 years. For a while, we had seen the amount of marijuana use lessen, and then it picked up again a little bit. So students often have friends at home. They're bringing it onto campus with them when they come as freshmen, and that's another way of making friends. They're sharing their pot and developing a network of friends, if you will, with whom they can get high. Just like bringing from home, a number of students have been diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, maybe some learning issues, and bring on campus their Adderall. Adderall is quite a stimulant, and what college students tend to do is they combine it when they're drinking a lot. What that does is it creates a less sloppy drunk, because if you've got alcohol as a depressant and you've got a stimulant which is going to intensify, you kind of nullify, so you don't get the sloppy drunk, you get a more focused and unfortunately a longer active time of being compromised and inebriated. So for those students bring alcohol on board, we certainly warn mixing alcohol and Adderall. We warn about that. We do a lot of prevention education work around that. But we also encourage those students to keep it locked up because it can be in demand. It's considered a study aid. It's considered the ability to get a paper done and to focus. We'll hear students are looking for some Adderall or some Ritalin. Other drugs that we see on campus are cocaine. I'll tell you that tends to be more with our upperclassmen rather than the lowerclassmen. We do see pain meds. Again, these are prescription pain meds. They can certainly bring them from home, get them from their own medicine cabinets or grandparents' medicine cabinets, or there's certainly you can access buying it off the street. We do have students who use Xanax. Xanax is a benzodiazepine. It's an anti-anxiety depressant. It is particularly dangerous when mixed with alcohol. As I said earlier, alcohol is a depressant, and then when you add in another pharmaceutical depressant like Xanax, it's extraordinarily risky. It will depress the central nervous system to the point that the brain ceases sending the message for the body to breathe. And so that's very, very, very concerning. We work very hard in counseling and psychological services. We do have psychiatric evaluations, and we do have medication prescribing and management. We don't want stimulants coming from our prescribers, and we certainly are very judicious about any benzodiazepines and any anti-anxiety medication. Again, they can be addictive, but it's particularly dangerous when you mix with alcohol. Molly and ecstasy, MDMA, are typically used when there's big concerts like rave concerts. And this results in kind of a high, kind of a trip. It can also be dangerous because it influences the body temp, and we have to be careful when their body gets too hot too fast. So public safety is very well trained, and if we do have a concert at Fairfield University, we actually have a medical tent, medical unit, because we're very careful to provide that support and to also watch for these kinds of manifestations or symptomology involving any of this mixing or drugs that they're taking. In terms of drugs, I told you about the alcohol violations. Last year, 133 students were charged with violating the university's illegal drug use policy. So let's look at how we compare Fairfield University. We compared ourselves with our peer group as well as our national average. Fairfield students come out a little bit higher, high-risk drinkers than our peer groups and then the national average. Some of the thinking around that is that in New England, in the New England area, students, young people tend to have a higher incidence of high-risk behavior. It might be because they have the access of means. They might have money to buy it or access people getting it for them. They might have access in terms of driving or getting it there, getting it to parties, going to parties themselves. So we're mindful of that, and we address that. You can see as we go down those charts, again, we're a little higher, light and moderate. We're a little bit more than peer and national average. And again, in terms of non-drinkers, we don't have as many non-drinkers as peers and nationally. So we're keenly aware of that, and we program to that. Again, prevention, education. We do assessment, intervention, the whole gamut in terms of creating a safety net for these students' safety and their well-being. This is the heavy part of the talk. It's all kind of heavy, but in terms of consequences, what we know is that about 1,825 students die of alcohol-related unintentional injuries, and that can include car crashes. This is students not only driving, but being in a vehicle. These are things that we communicate, and we ask that you communicate the importance of not getting in a car if the driver has been driving, and certainly not to get in a car and drive if indeed your son or daughter, the individual, has been drinking. There's a real correlation between assault and drinking. I don't think that a lot of the students who get into fights or assault one another would ever do that, except that when they're compromised, when they're under the influence, again, the judgment is impaired, and they can become very impulsive, very angry. Sexual assault, I would say, I've been here 22 years, I would say 98% of all the sexual assaults that I have been involved with over the years had alcohol involved. It's not a causal correlation, but it certainly is a correlation that, again, there's some compromise with judgment and safety, and so we're very, very into communicating that message as well. Academic problems, you can imagine, if they've been drinking a lot, the work doesn't get done, maybe they miss classes, the papers aren't handed in on time, and we've had a number of professors calling with concern that the student is sleeping in the class or slurred speech, that they're maybe profoundly hungover. So it really does play out in all areas of their life. We've had many students who make suicide threats, sometimes an attempt, that I don't think they meant to say that they wanted to take their life, to end their life. But if they were under the influence, if they were compromised, if they were drunk, and they were impulsive, and they were emotionally distraught, they would say things that they normally wouldn't mean. I had a student who was very compromised, and she was at a lacrosse game, and her boyfriend didn't text her right back, and she told people she was going back to the dorm room, and she was going to kill herself. She never would have said that. She didn't really mean that she was going to kill herself, but she was so emotional and impulsive. And again, that's that alcohol on board that really, really impacts her thinking and her judgment. Health problems, certainly, as you know, with a lot of alcohol or drug use, it's going to compromise not only the brain chemistry, but the kidney, the liver, and just the overall health of an individual. We're concerned about the unsafe sex. We do have a health center that's open 7 days a week, and we encourage students, if they have any concerns, to utilize the health center. But again, it's a consequence that compromises their health and well-being. Other things are certainly vandalism, property damage. We had a group of men, and they yanked the sinks off the wall of a bathroom in a residence hall. Again, these were good kids. They wouldn't have done that, but they were drunk, and the alcohol really fueled them, and for some reason they thought that would be really funny, and they all got into this group effort and in a maladaptive way bonded around vandalism. So again, it certainly can impact the student and the student experience significantly. So what do we do at Fairfield University? How do we handle all this? I mentioned to you earlier the Connecticut state law is 21, so we recognize that and we uphold that. However, we'd be ostriches. We'd have our head in the sand if we didn't think that students at a college or university were going to experiment, that they were going to engage in drinking, and perhaps some drug use. So we have to figure out how to message them, how to communicate to them in order to mitigate risk and safeguard them. So we do a lot around prioritizing health and well-being of all students. We emphasize, and I'll talk in a minute about bystander, not only taking care of yourself and your well-being, but if somebody else that you're with, it doesn't have to be your friend, somebody that you're with you notice is struggling, then we encourage you to help them because they could be at risk. We utilize a lot of evidence-based strategies, so we're just not doing messaging, which unfortunately doesn't have high efficacy. We're really doing interventions and strategies that are evidence-based, one of which is motivational interviewing. So it's an approach that helps a student make their own decisions for healthier choices. We focus on Jesuit values. Cura personalis, I'm sure you probably heard by now or read by now, is body, mind, and spirit. So again, your health and well-being, not only your mind, your spirit, your body. Bystander approach, again, it's a Jesuit value. It's men and women for others. It means caring for the other. The bystander training that we do actually gives scenarios and strategies. So if you see somebody who, again, is struggling, or if you see somebody who might be in a risky position, not only for alcohol or drugs, but maybe sexual assault or an assault, how to intervene, how to help another. And we do a lot of that as well. We're not trying to put a dampener on them having fun and enjoying their college experience. We're trying to keep them safe and healthy. So we do a lot of alternative and alcohol-free activities. There's tons of programming. There's late-night activities. So if you hear your son or daughter say, oh, there's nothing to do here, there's a really lot to do here. But we're not going to serve them alcohol. And having said that, some of them come to these events under the influence, and we're mindful of that. Again, trying not to be punitive, but there has to be consequences, and that's for their sake and our community's sake. So the resources at Fairfield U, we have counseling and psychological services in our department. If a student has violated the alcohol or drug policy, and there's a level of concern about their use, and maybe it is beginning to morph into abuse, then they're referred for a substance abuse assessment. And the assessment is done by a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. She does a thorough evaluation, and we can't make anyone change, but we try to elevate their motivation to make healthier choices. The Student Health Center is right down the hall from us. Again, they're open 7 days a week. Any concerns about injury or illness, any concerns about their well-being, or if they've been exposed in a sexual assault, the health center is there to provide resources and help. We work very closely with the Office of the Dean of Students. That's the office that pretty much oversees our conduct, our community standards for conduct. So they are the ones with whom your son and daughter are going to meet with if there is a violation. From there, as I referenced earlier, they may be referred to counseling to take a closer look and to really explore, would it be beneficial to maybe look at not drinking? Maybe they're in a place where there's some real concern around addiction, and maybe we can give them some resources to get them the help that they need. Your students are all going to have an RA on their floor, a great resource in residence life, as well as an area coordinator, a master's level professional living in the building. And so these are people that, again, that safety net I talked to you about, there's an awful lot of people forming a safety net of care and concern, consultation, and referral. Campus ministry is a terrific resource. Many students, because of their faith and maybe their religious practices, feel very comfortable approaching a Jesuit or someone in campus ministry. Maybe there's less stigma involved for them, but it's not uncommon that they might find their way. Maybe they're worried they're drinking a little bit too much, or maybe they have regrets or some shame for some poor choices, and that might be a good place for them to go. As I said, public safety are extremely visible. They're on bike, they're on car, they're walking. In the middle of the night, If we're called down here, we have an on-call service for our clinicians. Public safety, again, is very visible. We partner with them. They are the ones doing the front line safety and making certain that the community standards are upheld. So I talked to you about there's kind of a range. So we're looking at education, prevention. What do I mean prevention? Prevention of high-risk drinking, the binge drinking, the heavy pre-gaming. So prevention, intervention, which can be an assessment, and then following up, again, based on level of care that is needed. We also, that can play toward the direction of our Collegiate recovery program. This is a program for our students who are in recovery from alcohol and drugs. It's a very structured, very supportive program that has housing right off our campus. Right now we have a men's house. When we have enough women, we'll have a women's house. But these are men right now who are living in a sober environment of recovery. And so we don't shame people who struggle with alcohol or drugs. We help them, and we want to keep them in our community. Again, I'm talking to you about the range and all the things we do, not out of defensiveness, not to cover ourselves, but to tell you that we take this very, very seriously. Your sons or daughter have already taken the online program regarding alcohol and sexual assault. First year experience is a weekly meeting that they have for the first semester. There's an alcohol and drug component of that. We do a lot of the bystander intervention programs that I've referenced. We offer a class, so if students are referred, maybe they're not at the point of abuse, but maybe they would benefit from learning how alcohol and drugs can impact them, and some strategies to reduce their drinking. That would be through a choices class. I mentioned that we do assessment, we do treatment, we have a recovery house, we have AA meetings on campus, and an awful lot of alternative alcohol-free programming. So that's what we do. Here's what we need from you. We need to form a partnership. There is nothing more important than the safety, the well-being of your children, your sons and daughters, our students. They are here to receive a quality Catholic Jesuit education, but truly we need to keep them safe, and we want them to have the full college experience so they leave here fully functioning adults who can go off and be responsible citizens of the world. So we need you to talk with them in effort to partner with us. I would say certainly be clear on what your expectations are, and maybe you talk to them about, you understand that a lot of people think it's the synonymous, the college experience involves alcohol and maybe some smoking pot, maybe some drugs, and then tell them what you expect, what you want to see happen. Additionally, it's one thing to give expectations. That doesn't have a lot of weight or leverage unless you're clear what are the consequences. And if you do not live up to these expectations, then the following will occur. Some parents in the past have said to their sons or daughters, I'm going to give you an allowance. But if you violate the alcohol policy, if you are written up, if you are in a fight, if you are behaving in a manner that goes against our family values, or if you are harming yourself or others, then that allowance won't be forthcoming. Maybe that's your consequence. Maybe your consequence is, I'm sure you're going to talk to them about academics, what grades you want, and if they don't get it, what happens? The same thing. What about their behavior? What about their care of themselves and others, and if that doesn't happen? So whether or not it's that they have to come home and they have to meet with you, or maybe you want them to meet with a counselor, those are your options, and we encourage you to lay that out up front so that nobody's blindsided in the event that you get a letter, and you will. You will get a letter from the Office of the Dean of Students if there's a violation in terms of substance use or abuse. I talked about natural consequences. And I would really implore that even though you love them so much and want to help, please be mindful not to rescue. Please be mindful not to gyp them of their learning experience, because if they can go through the learning experience and gain some insight, gain some better strategies for self-care, that's what we want. The education is not just in the classroom, it's outside of the classroom. This is life education. I can't tell you how many parents have called in, primarily to the Office of the Dean of Students, and tried to say, please don't give them any sanctions, and they didn't really mean it, and I disagree with you, and don't give them a fine. Well, then they're not going to learn. So please let us do the work that we're going to tell them up front. Here's what we expect of you, and here are the consequences, so that they can make informed choices. And we really want you to partner with us in, again, educating and developing healthy, safe people for life. So that's what I have to present to you. Again, I understand it's very heavy. It can be very scary. We get how much you love them, and we will do the best that we can. It's best if we partner. So if you have any questions, please let us know.
Great. We have a couple questions, Sue, that were submitted. The first one, has the university considered the possibility of banning alcohol entirely?
Well, essentially, as you know, by state of Connecticut law, it is banned for under 21. There has been conversations over the year that we would be totally alcohol-free, and that hasn't been accepted favorably, because it really then sends a message that individuals over 21 don't drink responsible or can't find a way to drink responsible. That's not the messaging that we want. We have talked more recently. We have an alcohol and drug committee. Last year we brought up the topic of not having hard alcohol on campus, but rather we would be a campus that serves beer and wine to individuals over 21 as opposed to hard liquor. We're always trying to figure out what's the best practice, what's consistent with our messages, what's the best thing for our student and our community.
Great. We had a parent also write in about asking about the amnesty policy that we have here, and asking if you could provide a bit more detail about that.
Yeah, so the amnesty policy is our effort to not have students be afraid that they're going to get in trouble. Again, this prefrontal lobe, the judgment, they tend to default into a kind of an adolescent mindset of, oh, geez, I don't want to get in trouble. And meanwhile, maybe they're trying to help somebody who is very compromised, very inebriated, and they get afraid that if they call public safety, they're going to get in trouble, or that the person who's really sick by now might get in trouble. That doesn't happen. Their lives are far more important than getting in trouble. We say to people, who cares? Get in trouble if you're going to save a life. But they're not going to get in trouble. When public safety responds, they clearly document that this was a good Samaritan, that this is somebody who will not be sanctioned, will not, it sounds so juvenile, get in trouble. But that's how they tend to think. So thank you for bringing that up.
And the last question, we have a parent asking what type of opening line they might use to even begin this discussion. What might you recommend for that?
I think a starter is, let's talk. And maybe instead of you being the primary talker, ask them, what do you imagine it will be like when you're at a university and you see people drinking? Have you thought about it? Get them to kind of process. Have they thought it through? And then certainly you want to hear them and then tell what your expectations are again, and what the consequences are. But I think always couching it in your safety, your well-being are paramount to me, and I want you to have the best experience you can. That's what this is about. And in order to do that, you need to be healthy and well and safe.
Thank you. Those were all of our questions.
Thank you, everyone, and use the time in the next few days to talk to them. And we look forward to welcoming you on campus on Sunday, and importantly, our students, our new students. Thank you.